Yo, what up everybody, welcome back to another video. Hey, this Tezu. Again, are humans OB? Let's get straight into it. Wait, before we get into it, if you please watch the end of the video. If you watched the end, and you enjoyed it, come on, leave a like and subscribe and comment. If you made it to the end, other than that, let's get straight into it. Yeah.
This episode was sponsored by Scotia.
Yes, sir.
Human beings. Are they as overpowered as the game's community would lead you to believe? Short answer,
Yes.
They're the most meta-defining build of all time, and the undisputed top build in the current expansion.
True.
But believe it or not, this wasn't always the case. Humans used to get bodied left and right on a daily basis by other players. And it took a pretty long time before the player base learned how to actually make use of the human build's unique abilities. The story of the humans' rise to dominance is a really interesting one. And so today, we're going to do an in-depth look at the humans' abilities, their strengths, and their weaknesses. Because yes, they do have weaknesses. We'll also go over notable matchups, and finally look at the steps human players took in order to reach their dominant status.
Well, Missy will be weakness. We can't go hand in hand, can't go straight up. Without anything, just could have hard bodies and stuff and not a bunch of stuff.
First, their unique abilities.
I build stuff.
In my video about primates, but I'll recap here and also go into more detail. First off the bat, we have their ability to throw things. Other builds can throw things, but humans can do so harder, faster, and further than anyone
I'm more
else.
accuracy.
The reason for this is their body structure. Bipedal builds are tough to balance, both in the game development sense and the
I think you're
self-reliance
joking.
sense. Throwing an item with any real force behind it requires serious balance, achieved only by having shorter arms and longer legs. This is why humans can launch projectiles at deadly speeds, whereas other primates kind of just lob things without putting much effort into it. If they tried to, they would knock themselves over. Even if chimpanzees could figure out how to craft a spear, there's no way they could throw it hard enough to deal any significant damage. Next, their stamina regeneration. Humans can chase down anything. You try to run from a human, you might outspeed them initially, but you'll run out of stamina much sooner than they will, and they'll catch up to you while you're in your weakened state.
We actually got it like that?
Partially because of their
Sheesh.
superior balance again, but mostly it's because of the human build's unique choice to not spec into fur. This gives them access to the extremely
Yeah, why are you holding this
broken
up like that?
sweat. Every other current build that's decent at distance running recharges stamina by using the move Pant.
Pant.
This works great, but it does require the user to stop running. Sweat, on the other hand, works better while moving, massively extending the distance a human player can run. They've got a few other important abilities that are essential to their kit, but aren't unique to humans. Their ability to speak is unique among mammals, but some birds can pull it off too. In humans, the ability to speak allows them to use one of their signature moves, Teach, which drastically boosts the skill point gain, mitigating the main penalty a player receives upon getting a game over. Humans and birds also share another unique trait, which is being able to stand upright. Standing
Alright.
upright is extremely useful for dealing with stealth builds that might normally be using tall grass to hide.
Nah, I think I did not see that in the
This
go
might be thought
down.
of as a human-exclusive move, and it certainly is the most effective at humans. But it turns out a pretty wide array of other builds can also do it. Birds, primates, cephalopods, and even fish can use tools on occasion. But sweating and throwing, uniquely human. Now onto their weaknesses. And yes, it's true that currently most human players can subvert these with their crafting skill. But it's important to recognize that without equipment, the human build isn't necessarily unstoppable. The decision to not have fur granted humans a massive buff to ability at the cost of stealth. In the mammal faction, fur is a prerequisite to all the major stealth abilities like camouflage. And lack of stealth abilities means getting in close on their targets is a serious challenge. The human build's lack of fur also means they have very low defense,
Why is there iron?
both from physical attacks and from environmental effects. Their skin offers almost zero armor, to the point where even players from lower weight classes have no trouble dealing damage to humans. And bear
Yeah,
skin
not at
also
all.
takes quite a bit of damage from the sun too. Humans are also pretty limited when it comes to the power stat. Physically, they're the weakest of the great apes, and don't really have any good options for dealing damage. They lack
Yep.
the classic high
That's
damage bite
broken.
attack that nearly every other non-herbivorous build relies on, instead having to resort to blunt attacks like punch and kick, which right now aren't very effective against builds that have thick fur or skin. The last major weakness I can see is that they're pretty bad at dealing with stealth. The lack of night vision means darkness can really hamper their ability to locate targets. And their
Nah,
lack
can
of
you imagine
smoke
being in that
senses-
situation? You camping. Butterfly. Cool, just chilling eating some beans or whatever, right? Yeah, some rustling around. Look around. Okay, we got sea eyes. Alright, it's like alright one. I can maybe get away. But then they just keep popping up. Imagine that, like, no, not like this. Can you imagine that? I just keep popping up. In a second, I'll break down right there. I'll be like, no, not like this. I'm crying. Be funny as hell. I cry.
Okay, now let's talk about matchups. Obviously, a key feature of the human build is being able to craft equipment. Given basic equipment like low-level armor and hunting gear, the human's best matchup is going to be medium-large mammals. Unlike blunt damage, piercing damage is quite effective versus builds with thick hide, but on defense they're actually pretty awful. The human's only option on defense
And I guess
against the
definitely
large
gonna
mammal
get
is
crushed.
intimidation, unless they've got some crazy high-level equipment. But I'll make a video on power creep later. The classic human equipment cannot stop a charging tank main unless the intimidate attempt works. But overall, this matchup is one of the reasons humans became top tier. Hardly any builds have favorable matchups against tanks. But that's not to say humans don't have their counters though. As I said before, stealth can be really effective against them due to their lack of
I guess
keen
look
sense
at
of
that.
smell and night vision.
And then we just keep popping up.
Much any fight as long as they've got time to prepare.
Oh, this is
But
funny.
taken by
Hey,
surprise,
I'm taking out
humans
some.
have a
I'm
lot
taking
more
out some
options.
odds.
Another thing
We're
humans
gonna
have
get
trouble
jumps
dealing
crazy.
with is flight. Even when a human has a ranged weapon, players with high aerial mobility are pretty safe during flight. Now, as far as I know, there aren't any bird builds powerful enough to one-shot humans, which is important because blunt attacks like punches are actually quite effective against birds. Birds have hollow bones that are resistant to tension and torsion, but not compression. This is the opposite of mammal bones, which are resistant to compression and tension, but not torsion. The point is, birds aren't the best choice against humans, but flight has been unlocked by 4 different classes in the game. Birds, which we just discussed, aren't a good choice.
Insects?
Bats, which
Oh.
do even less damage than birds. Reptiles, which unfortunately had their aerial builds banned in patch 1.3.1. And insects. Flying eusocial insects have by far the best matchup versus humans in the entire game. Humans have 0 counterplay
And I
against
can feel
super
it. What
stinging
the hell?
insects. I mean, sure, there are special items that they can use.
What kind of wasp that is?
They're prepared. But the amount of human mains who've chosen that as one of their prestige abilities is pretty small. Humans' lack of fur means they have no innate defense against stings. Stings also have the chance to proc the Amphylaxis debuff, which can actually lead to a game over. And it's for this reason that the high score for human eliminations belongs to the Africanized honeybee, known better by its community-given name, the killer bee. And even if the stings don't proc the allergic reaction effect, they will still definitely achieve their primary goal of dropping their resolve to 0 and granting you control over the territory. And we can see that
Doesn't get started
the
now.
viability of killer bees has only been growing now that they've expanded their territory outside of Africa. Which brings me to my main point. Are humans overpowered? Well, just like the Africanized honeybee, humans really only became OP once they escaped the African server and invaded other areas. Notice how
Alright.
humans took down megafauna across every terrestrial server except Africa. The African tank mains have the matchup experience and play options to deal with the vast array of skills humans have access to. But the rest of the community was totally unprepared to deal with the rapid invasion of new human mains invading their competitive scene. In other words, the devs could have prevented the massive destabilization of the current meta if they'd region-locked humans. Staying competitive in the
Region
meta
lock would be
requires the
crazy.
player constantly be leveling up their skills. There's no better example of this than the rapid rise to dominance that humans experienced. If you'd like to level up your own skills and unlock new ones, I highly recommend Skillshare. Skillshare is an online
WI. But that's it. But hope everybody enjoy. If you enjoy, you made it this far, comment. Come on, tell me you made it this far. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe. I guess you get more content like this. And that, peace out, see y'all niggas in the next one. No cap.